Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with classic pecan pie. That's right, yes, pecan. You know what, on second thought, I should have went with pecan, and we will. Actually, that's not much better. But anyway, April is National Pecan Month, or if you prefer, Pecan Month. I'm really not sure which pronunciation is correct. Probably neither. But anyway, I've never posted a classic version of this pie until now. And of course, the first thing we're going to need is a ready-to-bake pie shell. And you can use one of our fabulous recipes to make this, or you could buy it pre-made. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't judge you. And I'll give links and more info about that on the blog, but basically we need one 9.5-inch pie shell ready to bake. And what we're going to need to do before we fill this is something called blind baking. And to do that, we're going to use these. Those are pie weights. And some of this parchment paper. So we're going to go ahead and take a round piece of parchment paper, bigger than the pie, of course, and center that over the top, kind of push it down a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and pour in our pie weights. And we'll go ahead and we'll try to distribute those as evenly as possible. You really want to try to get them up against the edge. And of course, I realize a lot of you don't have pie weights to use. In that case, just go ahead and use your tart weights. By the way, dried beans also work perfectly. So go ahead and spread those out all the way to the edge, best you can. Kind of even them out. Possibly give them an old shake-a-shake-a. And what this is going to allow us to do is pre-bake this pie crust a little bit without it losing its shape. So once we have that set, we'll pop that in the middle of a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, we'll go ahead and pull it out and transfer those pie weights into a bowl and be very careful. There's nothing worse than a whole bunch of small hot balls rolling all over your kitchen floor. So watch what you're doing. And once we've carefully and successfully removed our parchment and pie weights, we're actually going to go ahead and pop that back in for another 10 minutes. And that will finish the pre-baking phase. And by the way, one optional step, since the oven's already hot, I like to give my pecans about a 7 or 8 minute toasting beforehand. So when I see there's about 7 or 8 minutes left on the timer, I'll go ahead and pop the nuts in. And then when the timer rings, we'll go ahead and remove our pie shell, which at this point should be a very, very light golden color. So our crust is ready, our pecans have been lightly toasted, and it's on to the rest of the filling, which could not be simpler. So into a saucepan, we're going to toss a whole stick of butter, and then 3 kinds of sugars. Some white sugar, some light brown sugar, and some corn syrup. Ooh, scary. But relax, it's not scary. This is just good old-fashioned light corn syrup. This is not the same stuff as the evil high fructose corn syrup. I consider high fructose corn syrup the margarine of sweeteners, so do not eat or drink things with that in it. Next up, we're going to toss in a little bit of flour, a little bit of milk. Actually, I was out of regular milk, so I used almond milk. So basically, that makes me a hipster. That's fine. I was going to grow a soul patch anyway. We're also going to need some salt, a little bit of vanilla extract, and yes, that bottle right there is bourbon. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of whiskey. And you might be thinking, why are you using your good stuff? That's not my good stuff. But anyway, at that point, we're going to go over to the stove, and we're going to put that on medium heat. And basically, we want to bring this to a boil. So I'm going to give it a stir, and I have absolutely no idea why I'm trying to do this with a spatula. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a whisk here. When it comes to whisking, whisks are so much better. So we're going to give that a stir as it comes up to temperature. And eventually you'll see it bubbling around the outside, around the outside, around the outside. And at that point, I like to give it another stir. And then in just about a minute or two, you should see it come to pretty much a full boil. And as soon as we see that, turn off the heat immediately. All right, so the heat's off. We'll give it a stir, and we're just going to let that sit there cooling on the stove a little bit for about 5 or 10 minutes. And why we want to let that cool down just a little bit is because the next step is going to be to introduce this to some eggs. And there they are. I got 3 large eggs. So we'll go ahead and we'll bust those 3 eggs in the yolks, and we'll go ahead and give them a fairly thorough whisking. And then once we've done that, and our sugar mixture has sat for a few minutes, we'll slowly drizzle it into the egg mixture. Start slow, of course, because you don't want to scramble these. So I'm going to splash a little in, stir it up, splash a little more in, stir it up. And once the first half of that's been kind of stirred in semi-gradually, you can go ahead and add the rest quicker. And as soon as that's all mixed in, we are ready for final assembly. By the way, make sure your oven is still on 350. So to get this ready for the oven, let's go ahead and add our pecans to our pre-baked pie shell. And by the way, please use pecan halves, not chopped pecans. I'm sorry, but I consider chopped pecans for this pie borderline unholy. And then once the pecans are in there, let's go ahead and pour in our filling. And that should just about come up to the edge of the crust. And by the way, you're going to want to make sure that every nut has been coated with that mixture. So I do like to spatulate that a little bit, make sure there's no dry ones on top. And by the way, if you can sneak a few more pecans in, go ahead. Mine looked like it was just a hair underfilled, so I put in a few more nuts. So that's me and you adjusting. But bottom line, you want to fill that just below the top of the crust. And at that point, we're pretty much ready for the oven. Of course, just to be safe, we'll give it a couple old shake-a-shakas and a few old tapa-tapas. And then we'll go ahead and we'll place that back in the center of our 350-degree oven. And we'll bake it for about 40 to 45 minutes until it looks like this. It should totally look amazing. The crust should be a beautiful golden brown. And if you do happen to give it a little jiggle like this, you shouldn't see any wiggle in the center. All right, if your center seems a little soupy, put it back in for a few minutes. But once it is done, I want you to make sure you let this cool completely before you try to slice it. I like to go traditional and let mine cool in front of an open window. And of course, if you do that also, I will give you the standard disclaimer, watch out for bears. And then of course, once it's cooled, your patience will be rewarded with a gorgeous slice of pecan pie, which you could eat as is, or a la mode, which is of course French for with ice cream. Not really, but in America, that's what it's French for. So I top mine with a little vanilla ice cream, and that is almost too gorgeous to eat. Almost. So let me take a bite here, and there's just no words. There's a reason this is such an iconic American pie, and as you know, I'm not a big dessert person, but this really is a spectacular treat. So anyway, there you go, classic pecan pie. If Chef John can pecan pie, so pecan you. So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.